Hey everybody, it's David Jenkins with Fawnville Morrissey Realty. I'm a residential real estate broker here in the North Carolina Triangle. And I want to talk for a minute about the building inspection, also known as the home inspection, that typically happens in the course of buying and selling property in North Carolina. It's not required, but it's customary to have a building inspection done. Usually it's paid for by a buyer, but sometimes a seller might pay to have an inspection done. So you might ask yourself, why would a seller decide to have a pre-listing inspection done? Well, in North Carolina, we use a due diligence contract. And in that contract, the buyer has the right to terminate for any or no reason that purchase contract. So what oftentimes happens is a buyer and seller go under contract, a buyer does an inspection, finds some surprises, makes some requests of the seller feels very frustrated about it, and the seller feels hostage unless they go and put on a new roof or remediate for mold or in the crawl space or replace air conditioning and heating system. Unless they do these things, the buyer says they're going to terminate, and they're like, oh my gosh, I felt like I gave up a lot in the initial negotiations and now we're having to do a second round of negotiations. Wouldn't it be great, the seller might think, if I could have known these problems in advance and then either A, disclose them to the buyer and say, I'm glad you like my house. Please know that there's a little bit of mold in the crawl space. There's actually probably more mold on my shower curtain than there is in the crawl space. But here's an inspection report and they mention it here. And I just want you to know that if you have a problem with it, then maybe you should buy another house. The seller could disclose these problems in advance and find a buyer that could live with them. Or the seller could bring in some inexpensive contractor and get them done and then not have to disclose them at all because they're done. Or the seller could put in new air conditioning and heating or make the expensive repair and then have a higher list price than they otherwise would have because they'd say, look, this house comes with brand new air conditioning and heating. So those would be some reasons why a seller might want to find out problems in advance. Okay, and then the question is, regardless of whether it's done by a buyer or a seller, what all is inspected? Well, a home inspector is going to test the air conditioning and heating. It's going to look for that fungal growth in the crawl space. It's going to check for roof leaks. It's going to check all the built-in appliances, see if they are functioning as intended. They are not going to check for code violations. So for instance, if a house was built with an electric freestanding range and say a range hood above it, and then over the course of time the homeowner maybe put in a built-in microwave and put in a gas range, maybe the clearance between the top of that flame and the bottom of the microwave is less than what the county code for that time in that place would call for, the building inspector is not going to call that out. So just know that code violations will not be in your inspection report. What differentiates a good inspector from a bad inspector? Well, largely that depends on if you're the seller or you're the buyer. You know, if you're doing a pre-listing home inspection, do you really want to have an inspection report that's super thick and detailed to talk about every loose screw? I mean, maybe not. Maybe you want to say just stick to the facts on that inspection report, whereas a buyer might appreciate a very detailed report with loads of pictures and have a 75-page summary. I have suggestions for both type of inspectors, so if you'd like those recommendations, just let me know. But anyway, another thing that makes a good home inspector, you know, in my opinion, from a bad one, is someone who takes the time to explain things, regardless of whether it's to a buyer or a seller. And that could be in person during the inspection or after the inspection by phone, text, or email. Could answer a lot of questions without a big fuss. The benefits of a reinspection: sometimes in the course of the transaction, the buyer and seller will agree that the seller will make some repairs, and the buyer might be a little apprehensive were those repairs done correctly. And almost all inspectors will agree for $100 or $150 to come back and reinspect the property to see if the repairs were done correctly. One more thing I want to say about the building inspection: it's not just for resale property. It's a great idea to have your own building inspection done when you purchase new construction. They will always find some surprises. Guarantee it. If you have any questions about this or anything else to do with the purchase of residential real estate in North Carolina, please give me a call. My contact information is below. Thank you.